God can change your life in a single day. Joseph spent 13 years being prepared through betrayal, slavery, and prison. It looked like God had forgotten, but then one ordinary day, everything changed. Welcome to Refining Grace, where we study the Word of God to become refined, strengthened, and full of God's grace. It's been 2 years since the Cupbearer was released. 2 more years of waking up in prison for Joseph. 13 years since his brother had sold him into slavery. 13 years of following God's plan, but still in prison. The pit, slavery, prison. It wasn't an easy life for Joseph. I'm sure Joseph had his doubts during this time. Why am I here, Lord? I've done nothing wrong. But things were about to change. Things were about to get a whole lot better. Joseph's circumstances were about to change in an instant. The cupbearer had forgotten about Joseph for 2 whole years, but God was about to remind him. Pharaoh had two dreams. In the first dream, there were 7 cows that came up out of the river. These cows were fat and pretty. They were excellent cows. They started feeding on the grass in the meadow by the river. Then 7 other cows came up. These cows were lean and skinny. They looked like they were barely making it. You could see their bones. They were just skin on bones. But the thin cows consumed the fat cows. Pharaoh woke up and fell back asleep and had a second dream. In the second dream, there were 7 heads of grain that came up on a stalk. These 7 heads were plump, they were luscious, they were big, kind every farmer dreams of. But then it said that there was thin heads that sprang up after the 7 plush heads. These heads looked like they had been through a storm, like the wind had blew away everything. They were barely there, but the thin heads devoured the fat heads. This stumped Pharaoh. He didn't know what was going on. What do these dreams mean? He gathered together all of his wise men, the magicians, the sorcerers, anybody he could find, and none of them could answer, what is this dream about? About then, the cupbearer remembered. God reminded him of Joseph. And he said, Pharaoh, I'm sorry, I forgot about this guy. I promised that I was going to tell you about him. But he can interpret dreams. His God lets him know what dreams mean. Pharaoh immediately called for Joseph. Joseph instantly went from being a prisoner to being called by Pharaoh. They took him and they cleaned him up. He shaved. He probably bathed for the first time in how many ever years he'd been in prison. And he was placed before Pharaoh. In just a matter of a short time, he went from prison to Pharaoh's palace. Within a day, within moments, he went from being stuck in a prison to being called to the Pharaoh's palace. Our circumstances can change quick. It took 13 years, but then all of a sudden, Joseph was standing in front of Pharaoh. He was standing in a palace. Joseph had Pharaoh tell him his dreams, and then Joseph interpreted. He said, the dreams are one dream, but because there was 2 dreams, that shows that God's saying, nothing's going to change this. It's going to happen. Joseph began to tell him, he said, there's going to be 7 years of plenty. Not just plenty, God's going to bless, and there's going to be more grain than we know what to do with. But then there's going to be 7 years of famine. 7 years where nothing's going to grow, where you're not going to be able to sustain food. God is warning you so that you can prepare. Joseph then lined out a whole plan of how to prepare for this famine, how he needs to appoint someone who is smart and is educated and someone who knows how to take care of this, someone who can institute stock houses. My wisest men couldn't even tell me what this dream was. How are they going to do this? Your God's giving you the knowledge, you're going to do it. In an instant, he was a prisoner, and then he was second only to Pharaoh. Pharaoh took off his ring. He placed it on Joseph's hand. That ring was a sign of power. You're over all the people in Egypt. They're not going to do anything without your permission. The only one that's going to be over you is me. We're prisoners to second in power. You know, we wait many times for what God is doing in our life. God gives us a vision, but it seems like it's not going to happen. Everything seems like it's going wrong. God had given Joseph a dream that he was going to be in power. God had told him that he was going to lead his family. He didn't realize he was going to lead the greatest nation in the world at that time, but God had given him a glimpse. But then it seemed like it was all taken away. There's time when God gives us a vision, and it seems like it's all been taken away. It seems like there's no hope. But the hope is during that time we're learning. You see, during that time, Joseph learned patience. He learned how to lead. He learned how to stockpile. He learned the political aspect that he was going to need. Joseph learned all that in this time of trial. God is teaching you something today, something that you will need. Just keep your trust in him. Don't let your circumstances stop you from God's promise, because those circumstances are stepping stones. Just take each step at a time. Like Joseph, they won't be easy. There's going to be some hard steps, but it's all going to be worth it in the end. Remember, God isn't deterring you. He's positioning you. The process may not make any sense at all, but one day you will see how every step fit into God's plan. Joseph didn't go from prison to the palace by luck. It was by God's design. He went because God had been preparing him through every pit, every prison, and every painful season. Your process is preparing you for your purpose. Joseph now had everything he had once dreamed of, but his greatest test was still ahead. What happens when the very people who betray you suddenly stand in front of you? We'll discover the power of forgiveness, healing, and God's redemption in part 5. Remember, God doesn't just prepare blessings for you. He prepares you for the blessings. May God bless and keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you and give you peace.